and good evening, wherever you may be. My name is Miranda Rumi. I'm the chief organizer of the 2019 Bali IIT, which is going to happen on May 10th to 19th, 2019 in Ubud, Bali. And today, this is a part of the Get to Know the Trainer series. I have with us Barbra Esher. She's from, well, I'll let Barbra introduce herself, but Barbra is going to be one of the 5 trainers, the lead trainers for the Bali IIT this time. And we're very, very excited and happy to get Barbra on board. And the webinar is an opportunity to get to know the trainers up close and personal, because sometimes not everybody may have that opportunity, even though there's going to be like 9 days, but usually it's in class or in passing. So here is actually a chance to be really close and intimate, and you can ask Barbra questions, and even, like, I don't know, Barbra, maybe Barbra can also answer questions even beyond this webinar, like through Facebook or through our Facebook group for the Bali IIT. All right. So so Barbra, I would like you to introduce yourself a little bit more, where you're from, and what I think, how you got into NVC.
Well, thank you, actually, Miranda, for that introduction. When you used the word to experience Barbra up close and personal, I felt like this is real tenderness and shakiness in my body, and wanting to share a little bit about me. And I know there's even a little bit of a moisture in the corner of my eye, with the possibility of sharing who I am, and what brought me to NVC, and why this is so alive for me to be in Bali in particular, to be sharing this. Well, first of all, I'm speaking to you from just south of Baltimore, a little tributary off the Chesapeake Bay. This is where I live with my partner and my little tiny dog, who might be announcing himself in the background. He really likes to express himself. Please flow with that if you don't mind. And I did live in Bali for many years, and ever since then, I've had a deep connection with Bali, with my husband, my Balinese husband, who still lives there, and my son, who is half Balinese. Wow, I had no idea this much would be coming up. But I'm going to connect with that and say that it's actually through my son, my Balinese son, that I came to NVC. He was when he was 18 years old. When he was 17 years old is when he went into the first treatment center to be treated for addiction, primarily heroin. That's what was often his drug of choice on the surface, although he wouldn't have referred to it like that. And it was pretty scary for me. And when we're in pain, it really does kick up our old strategy for dealing with pain. And what came up for me it was a huge amount of shame and blame. And that shame and blame is a wall that you put between your heart and the other person. So obviously, as you can imagine, if you're a child or you're a young person, as he was a young man, shame and blame was not what he wanted to hear from me. But it was all that I had access to, because that's how my mother dealt with me. So that's where I went to. So much, you've got to, you got to get your head out of your ass. You got to get a job. You got to get off these drugs. This criticism and blame that just pushed him further and further and further away from me. And I was desperate. I mean, I was I became addicted to him not using drugs. So disconnected from me and what was going on with me.
Mm.
Um, and it was creating further this vast worlds between my son and me, and his addiction just got worse and worse, and my addiction to him not using, or him wanting me to control his behavior, just got worse and worse. And then luckily, he, over a 10-year time period, he went through about, I guess, about 9 drug and alcohol treatment centers and halfway houses and programs such as that. But his second one, luckily it was number 2, Karen up in Pennsylvania, that the counselor heard this interaction between my son and me. You know, my son, like, this is my son, rah, 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 and this is me, rah, 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 and heard us and said, now, let's take a time out here and let's take a deep breath. Let's take a deep breath. And I'm wondering if you both would be willing to check out this guy, Marshall Rosenberg. And it's like, what are you talking about? Is that like another addiction program? And it's like, no, no, no. This is a guy who really, really helps you communicate from your heart instead of from these barriers that we create, that we think we're protecting our heart. But in actuality, we're just creating worlds between us and the other person. So I became interested, and he became interested. So we started, it was a long commute back and forth from this particular program he was in. And I started listening to these CDs. And then eventually, when he got a chance after 30 days for a home visit, he started listening to him too. And it's like, oh my God, this is, of course he can't hear me. Of course. And I really wanted hope. I really wanted hope that he could somehow hear what I'm trying to express. And when he heard Marshall Rosenberg quote Rumi um, saying that, oh my God, it's just as much as I've said it, I can't even remember it right now. But this idea that out beyond the ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field.
There's a field.
And I will meet you.
There.
I will meet you there. And he heard that and he went, yes, yes. And he actually became interested in NVC as well, is because obviously, as you can imagine, being an addict, he felt extreme shame around this. And so much blame towards him for being an addict. So the both of us became interested, and I eventually learned to say, your behavior is really, really scaring me. I am so afraid that you're going to die. And when I was able to say that, particularly when I was able to say it and allow the emotion to come up and allow me then go into, and you're so precious to me that I really want to know what needs are alive for you when you're choosing the strategy of using heroin. And he would go into, I need this. It's like, yeah, I'm hearing there's something that you need, but the way this process teaches is that it's just a strategy, heroin, that there's something deeper. And I want to hear about that. I don't want to hear about the heroin. I know that you really think that you need heroin. What is underneath of that? And he eventually was able to communicate that, first of all, being a young person, I have a need for autonomy. I have a need to make my own decisions about my life. It's like, okay, then. You know, as a mother, it's very, very difficult to let go and just let your child make decisions for themselves. He said, I really have a need for peace. And I just kind of like, oh yeah, that's the same as me. I really have a need for peace as well. And he really thinks that this is the only strategy to get peace. So he started exploring other strategies for getting more peace in his life. He really wanted acceptance. He really wanted me to accept him for exactly who he was in that moment, in all of his pain, all of his struggles, all of his what may be seen as imperfections. He really wanted me to be able to accept it. But more importantly, he needed to accept himself. When he was able to say, oh, I really have to find a way to accept myself for who I am in this moment, that created such deep acceptance in me and understanding in me. So that's what started my journey. Eventually, um, I became passionate about taking classes. I was flying all over the world to study more deeply with Robert Gonzalez. The way that I support myself still, because I offer a lot of trainings for free or at a reduced rate, is through acupuncture. And I was amazed of how similar acupuncture is with to nonviolent communication. Because so many people come to me in pain, right? When you think of acupuncture, you think of like how this hurts or that hurt or they're ill. And in acupuncture, you go into the pain. You go right into the center of it and you find out where it's stuck. And it's the same thing with NVC. What is stuck there? What's not moving? And how am I able to facilitate the free flow of chi, of energy into that area of the body or into that area of our thinking? So with acupuncture is where is it stuck in the body? And with NVC is like, where are we stuck in our mind, in our thinking? What is our core beliefs that are stopping us from moving with the life energy in this present moment? And of course, we needle people with our words, right? So we can also heal people with words as well. So it was really, for me, a no-brainer transition as far as combining those two fields, acupuncture and Chinese medicine, with an awareness practice that that people think that it's a communication tool. Kit Miller is often quoted as saying NVC is an awareness practice masquerading as a communication tool. And that's the way that I teach NVC, and that's the way that I practice it, is what's going on in this present moment? What's going on in our bodies? Because our bodies are really the doorway to our aliveness and to all of this life energy that we experience as pain. So the idea is to go right to the center of it and be with it. And then with that presence, with that light of mindfulness, with that concentration, things start to open and flow. And our experience of the pain is different. Is that enough of an introduction of how I came to this work, or is there anything else about that you would like to know?
Right now, I feel full. I feel very touched, and I'm still, feeling very moved at the moment with that introduction, which I didn't quite expect to go in. I mean, like as deep and as emotional as that, and it makes me understand you better and know you better in the ways that I didn't, and I don't know about the others with that. Yes. Okay. So that's the introduction, and thank you so much for showing your vulnerability and yeah, getting us to know who you are. So Yeah, how do we segue now into the topic?
That is a great
So,
question. How do we segue into the topic? And
mhm,
I have an idea, um, and and it's obvious, I think, that how the topic of addiction, of how that's alive for me, because basically every time I share NVC, mm, I am aware of how I came to this practice and how passionate I am about it, how much nonviolent communication and meditation has brought to my life. And so I really try to bring that that awareness, that tenderness, and a little bit of an urgency about my wanting to share this with other people. So along with the urgency is the acceptance of that I learned from my son, accepting people where they are. You know, not everybody wants to use the tools of NVC to explore their world, but if they do, there's some uh, I can see some tremendous gifts there. So addiction in particular, the dictionary, the clinical explanation of addiction is when our happiness, when we believe our happiness is outside of ourselves. When we think we can't be happy until I have a hit of heroin, or is sex to addiction, it unless I can have sex. There's this like there is this projection outside of our internal world of what we need to be happy, whether it's heroin, whether it's sex, whether it's food, whether it's shopping. Well, I'm not going to be happy until I have this thing. And definitely in the 12 steps room, for me, what I shared is that I had this illusion, really, that I couldn't be happy until my son stopped using heroin. And everybody in the room believed me. Like, you're right. He needs to stop using. And it's like, no, 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 that's not true. It's not true. It's really connecting with our needs is what's going to bring us happiness.
mhm,
And when I was able to connect with my need for connecting with that mom love, that I think every parent on the call can connect with that moment when we see our child's eyes for the first time and we're scared beyond belief. It's like, oh my God, how can I love somebody so much? Our hearts open as parents, right? Do you remember
mhm,
that, Miranda,
mhm.
when you saw your child? It's like,
Yes.
oh,
Yep.
we become connected to this vastness of love, this
Mhm.
hugeness
Yes.
of love, and this huge happiness that we feel when we connect with that love. And that's a beautiful thing. And that's for me
Mhm,
where I have found my source of happiness, is not saying
mhm,
like my happiness is connected with my child's eyes. No, my happiness is connected with the love
mhm,
I feel inside my own heart when
mhm,
I look at his eyes. And that is very, very different from the fear that I felt as a mother of like, unless I can keep this human being happy, I'm going to die. That's
mhm,
often what parents feel like. If my child is not here on the earth, I can't live. Very, very similar type of thing that many parents have felt. But intrinsically sourcing our happiness is one of the core principles of NVC. Finding our needs and finding the focus of this internal focus with self-compassion, with self-empathy. And we're in pain, not projecting. We're giving our power to another person if we're projecting our source of happiness onto somebody else. Like, I can't be happy until you stop, whatever it is. I'll use my partner as an extreme example. I cannot be happy unless you don't leave your dirty underwear on the kitchen counter. When I say that, people go, ah, there's a right or wrong there, right? You don't do stuff like that. But intrinsically, coming into contact with my needs, I couldn't have a conversation with him about that until I was really deeply aware that there's not a right or wrong there, that there's something alive in me that's different for him. It's really different, and even though like thousands of people on Facebook will agree with me that it's wrong to leave your dirty underwear on the kitchen counter, I have to let go of that. I have to connect with what needs of mine are not being met with that action before I can have a conversation with him, or at least be in touch with the possibility that there is no right or wrong here.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I have to say, there is a happy ending to that story. Immediately, what happened is I made a very bad request. NVC, I really focus a lot on requests because I think that NVC is really powerful in the being able to structure a doable request is really, really important. And I said, so I looked at the underwear. I looked at my husband. I said, would you be willing to put your underwear somewhere else right now? And he picked up the underwear and held it over the floor and dropped them. I'm glad to see the look on your face, right? Because it was like, that's actually not what I meant. But it was hysterical because it's such a great example. Is that I wasn't very specific, that I really would have preferred that he put them in the hamper or the washing machine, but not on the floor. So I actually had to wrestle with that for about 24 hours, get some empathy from a friend before I could talk to him the next day and say what was really alive for me. Is it actually, even though that there is this like, this health concern I have about like that type of behavior, there is this sort of association I have with respect and consideration and even my needs mattering. And once I could express to him, he never did that again. He never did it again. But my lame request did not get me what I want. But connecting with my internal world eventually did. So I'm using a fairly mundane example of NVC and its power.
Okay. Yes, yes. Barbara, I think we're going a bit off topic.
Okay, we are a little bit.
We want to, like, I think some people, like looking at there are some people who already know about NVC and probably understand about the consciousness,
Right.
but probably want to hear specifically about, the sex and the addiction. We talked a little bit already, but also about the death part.
Right.
But I think the title was very enticing when I put the word sex first. So let's start with that.
Let's start with sex. Absolutely.
And I know your class, when you start with sex, is already the biggest, it has the biggest attendance.
Thing right here. Sexual expression. Right can everybody read that? Sexual expression, right?
Yeah.
Right. I am so glad you want to talk with sex. And thank you so much. I really do appreciate how when I did get off topic, I wanted to show a mundane example of how our happiness is actually intrinsically sourced and instead of externally sourced. And sex is such a great example how we give somebody else the power to make us happy, because Yeah, of course, somebody else has the power, and it's your fault when I'm not happy, when I'm not enjoying sex. So the problem with, and it was a while. This was actually, I started teaching about addiction first, and then death, and then somebody came up with, and then it came to shame, and then what do people have the most shame around? And it's around sex, talking about sex, more shame than anything else. And it occurred to me that with NVC, that we could be with, again, our internal world and the shame that comes up with talking about sex. So again, I'm using that segue of wanting to express ourselves with the fullness of our sexual power, of our sexual energy, and to be able to have the words to be able to express that. And of course, the fullness of our power is inside of ourselves. So, if first of all, we're not talking about sex, which actually that seems to be the biggest problem. We use so many euphemisms and so many indirect requests. And so there's so much assumption around sex. There's so many core beliefs around sex. Of course, there's a lot of bad sex in the world. There's a lot of sex that people feel
Mm.
unfulfilled and really not connected with all the needs that can be met with sexual expression. There's so many needs. I mean, look at a flower, and how a flower is a blooming flower. That beauty is the fullness of our sexual expression. So the first thing that we do in talking about sex is looking at all the ways that we don't talk about sex, all the euphemisms. In dealing with any of these things, there's more euphemisms that we have for sex than any other topic. So that's the first thing we have to do. Let's look at all the ways we don't talk about sex. To look at all the words that we have for penis, for example, in so many different languages. That's actually really fun. We don't spend a whole lot of time with this, about 5 minutes, but look at all the euphemisms we have for talking about sex, for pretty common words like our genitals, or even sexual expression itself. We have, God, I'm sure there's thousands and millions of ways of talking about sex, but having it be indirect.
Okay, so how can we speak more directly? I'm just
Yeah,
a bit
let's get
concerned
to
about
that.
the
So
time.
first of all, the
We only
most
have
important
18.
thing
Mhm.
is to start with how we don't talk about sex, how we make assumptions. And then
Okay.
to look at so many needs that are met with sexual expression in exploring the needs. So look at sexual expression in your own life and how many needs are met by it or can be met, like connection. Like, what a great way to connect with somebody. Like intimacy, like fun. How about you, Miranda? If and I have to say, to take this class, um, and I'm not assuming anything about you one way or another. I don't know whether you have a partner or not, but I found that people, even if they haven't had a partner for 30 years, that they still get a lot out of this class. Like, with sexual expression, what are the needs met? Because so many people say, I don't need sex. It's like, no, that's let's not talk about sex. Let's talk about the needs. So that is, so after we
So
look at
how
how we
would you?
don't talk about sex, what are the
Mm,
needs met through sex? So we don't, so is that
mm.
clear?
Yeah, yeah. The needs are clear.
So,
And then
so step
how do we
number one
express
is
that?
what the euphemism.
Mm.
Step number two are the needs met with
Is the
sex and
needs
making a
are met?
list of
Yeah.
that. Step number
Mm.
three is looking at our core beliefs, looking at all, Marshall called it cultural crap. What are all the ideas that we have, that we've been taught about sex, that may not be true and may get in the way of actually our meeting our need? So it's so
Mm.
important to look at these core beliefs, because that's often the source of the shame. So if we look at the core belief, one core belief that I had is sex is not something you talk about. And you can just, did you have that core belief, Miranda, that sex is something you don't talk about? Or are you
Yep.
pretty open?
Well, I can be open, but it's something that I never learned. I have to
Yeah.
study it on my own and figure things out. And I think now, I'm 57 now. If I look back, actually, my vocabulary, my expression about
Yeah.
sex is pretty limited.
Right. Thank you. It's the same for
Uh,
me. Exactly the same way. Because when I was growing up, I grew up Catholic. I got some beautiful things from Catholicism, some beautiful values and needs met with that religion. And what I got was a lot of crap around sex, a lot of taboos, like, for instance, a core belief is that you don't talk about it. So it's good to, like Byron Katie does, is to turn that around. Well, first of all, what needs are met by not talking about sex? Well, it kind of brings up sometimes some, discomfort for people. If they're not used to talking about sex, you might touch some vulnerability. We'll look at the power of sex. Of course, you're going to be talking about, you know, touching some vulnerability. So, so what needs are met for not talking about sex? Maybe protection or safety. And then you turn it around. Like, so maybe instead of that core belief is you shouldn't talk about sex, explore what are the possibilities of maybe you should talk about sex. Maybe you should be open talking about sex and explore that. But first of all, give yourself some empathy for having that core belief. What are the needs
mm,
met by having that belief? And then exploring what needs can be met by being really, really direct, by asking for what you want. Maybe you have the core belief that women don't ask for sex. I know I got that. So explore the possibility of how would it be in your life, in your relationships, to ask, are you interested
mm,
in a more intimate relationship? Are you interested
yeah.
in exploring the discussion of what that would look like? Would you be interested in holding my hand right now? I know I've known you for 20 years, and I would really like just to hold your hand right now. So that intimacy
Mm,
of exploring the possibility of asking for what you want in a direct way. So that's a way of
mm,
unpacking that core belief. Two of them in that
wow.
case. First of all, women don't ask for sex. And second of all, sex shouldn't be talked about. So
Yeah,
does that make
like
sense?
it's I'm feeling some emotions just about this. I mean, I'm quite open talking about sex with people,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not in a relationship right now. But I imagine if I were in a relationship or in my past relationship, I would not be talking about sex with my partner.
Exactly.
You know?
Thank you. I'm
Yeah,
so glad
and
you shared that.
just thinking, okay, where would I start? And I mean, you gave a little bit of a few openings there,
Right.
but I'm imagining, just hearing you saying that, imagining myself saying that, I could already feel, the fear, the churning in the
Mhm.
guts,
Exact-
just saying that, and I can see,
Exactly.
this is a serious, this is not something that we can talk in 10 minutes and come out with a tool that we can already say. There's a lot of inner work that needs to be
Yeah.
dealt with first. A lot of emotions that we have. It's
Hmm.
not just like after this tonight we just say this the other person and just say, are you open to like talk about our intimacy and stuff like that, and
Right.
before we're ready
Right.
to work through some stuff yet, and
Uh-huh.
yeah, so but yeah, it sheds some light to the importance to look into this, because I think that it's a source of a lot of pain and and suffering that
Mhm.
we're become even buried under because we're not used or feel like we cannot talk about it, so it becomes very
Exactly.
lonely and isolated in the subject
Exactly.
text. Yeah.
Exactly. That loneliness and isolation and that tenderness that you're touching on now, that that is something to start exploring. And if the main tool that I would like you to take from this webinar is first of all, what do we do to not talk about this? What are the needs met actually by talking about it? What are the core beliefs? And what are the cultural taboos around not talking about this? Because I think this is what has led to the Me Too movement. Is this the problem with talking about it? That we're taught to, I don't know, when I was a teenager, no in sex meant no meant try harder for men. You're looking at me like what? But
Mhm.
I think that is part of the problem with Me Too movement is not being comfortable with talking about sex. I mean, that's one a beginning point of like why it's become, of course, the power over, which is again is another topic I'd like to explore at the conference, the IIT, is how there's a power dynamic there in our culture
Mhm.
that keeps us from speaking up and speaking out. And I'd like to explore that, have some awareness of needs met with that power dynamic and needs not met in that power
Mhm.
dynamic as well.
Yeah, well, even with like what 2 3 hour session, I still think there's a lot of things that needs to be explored,
Mm,
like to really heal our sexual injury or our sexual emotional injuries in this case. So I'm
absolutely.
really looking forward to your session, and we're kind of like running out of time now. We have about 9 minutes left.
Okay.
And so thank you for touching on that. I think there's a lot to explore, and those of us, who are attending, can look forward to your sessions. And those who aren't attending, well, consider coming and join the IIT, and go to balinvc.com and look for more information there. But before we move on, I'd like to maybe ask one thing that about you talk about what sessions you're going to give during the
Sure.
IIT.
Sure.
Yeah. So
Boy, that's
yeah,
gonna
let's go through that, and then after that we'll open it for questions.
Boy, it's amazing. Even just talking about my sessions, I feel like um, I spend a lot more than the maybe 8 minutes that we have left. But the yoga of NVC, of embodied empathy, is I think one of the important sessions that I'm going to offer. It's again using a NVC as an awareness practice of our bodies and actually the body positions that we put ourselves in, and we practice and coming aware of those ways that we practice these positions. Like this is a position that I've noticed I'm in a lot, and instead of opening my mouth when I get in this yoga position, as you say, go into another position and not this one, self-blame, and it's this one, and being able to care for ourselves with tenderness and then open to the other person and actually putting our bodies in that position, how powerful it is. And we're going to explore our bodies and in our communication and how important it is to be aware of the interconnections of our bodies and what we're saying. What keeps us from asking for what we want? There's a lot of emphasis on request, but I don't see that many requests being made. So again, what is it that keeps us from opening our mouths and saying what we want? Street giraffe is another topic that I'm interested in exploring. I live with somebody who has an NVC allergy. He is not open to NVC at all, so I have to use NVC in a very stealth way. People might be interested in strategies for doing that. How to speak up. I, believe it or not, I consider myself a very shy person. You'll notice, and if I'm in a large group, unless I'm leading it, it'll maybe weeks that we're together before I'll actually open my mouth. And I've gotten better at that, but exploring what keeps us from opening our mouths, what keeps us from speaking up. I'll be doing a class on sex, lies, and NVC. I'll be teaching a class on regrets and amends and how to express ourselves when what we've done does not meet our needs, and how to express it in a way that we're not beating ourselves up and that actually creates an action with the other person. I'd like to have time to do a class on interrupting, because that's a core belief that I have, that you should never interrupt. And since I'm not a person who identifies as speaking easily, could very well go, there could be a whole conversation and I don't get a chance to say a word. So how to do that in a way that I'm holding my need to speak and also some tenderness for the other person. They're meeting a need by speaking more words than I can track. And so how to hold my needs being heard with theirs, and doing it in a way that everyone matters. I'd like to share a class on the illusion of conflicting needs as well. We often think that we have to make compromises in order to get everything we want, but if we can actually take this need and hold it in hand with our other need, with our other one strategy and then another strategy, and we can look at the needs, and oftentimes we can meld them together and actually have all of our needs met. The fears, I have a passion with teaching classes for people that really want to share NVC, that want to bring NVC into the world. I'd like to have a lot of classes around with trainers, particularly Indonesian trainers. And what are the fears that we have around sharing NVC? What gets in the way? What are the things that we tell ourselves? It's like, well, if only I have one more class, then I can teach NVC class. What are the things that are getting in the way between us sharing NVC? It's very, very important thing for trainers to be able to explore, particularly if they're not sharing NVC as much as they'd like to. Expressing gratitude is another thing I'd like to share. And then, of course,
I'd like to interrupt there.
Please.
I'd just like to interrupt there. Yeah. I mean, I'd rather go to the questions, and I'm asking, I'm requesting of you if you could type all that down, and we could put it in the group of the possible sessions that you're going to give. So because I'm trying to note down, but I'm not able to catch up with everything that you said. If you could, you either type it to me or send it to me, and then I can post it in the Facebook, or I think that would be interesting.
And I have to say, I wish I'd had them written in a way that I could copy and paste them, but I don't. So, and I
not right now. We can do it later.
And we can do it later. So I will do it later. I'll get them to. And please post them. And thank you so much. I want to express a huge amount of gratitude for Miranda and everybody showing up. So much love.
I don't know if anybody want to have questions. Yeah. Well, I guess we're running out of time for questions. I want to go to all the sessions. That's what Lucinda said.
Thank you so much.
Yes. So post your questions on the Facebook group for the IIT, and Barbara can come back to it later. Right, Barbara? We can do that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
The attendees.
Appreciate everybody attending, and Miranda in particular. Bye-bye.
Yeah. See you soon. Bye. So bye-bye. I mean, I'm still here, and there's some of you in the Facebook. So I'm addressing you too. Hi, Shari. Hi, Tina. Hi, Sri Ram, Joe Field. Where if you missed the first part of the webinar, you can watch it again. It's very interesting, and it was very special when Barbara talks about her introduction to NVC and by way of her dealing with her son's addictions. So I encourage you to have a look at that. And otherwise, goodbye for now. And we're going to have a few more of this with the different trainers. We're going to do another one before the IIT. And if you have any question, please, you can post it on Facebook or contact me, or through balinvc@gmail.com or visit balinvc.com. So thank you. I'm Miranda, and until the next time. Bye-bye.